We tell you this offseason's most overrated and underrated stories and why they matter. That's coming up next here on Locked On Bucs.
Your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome to this WTSP Wednesday edition of the Locked On Bucs podcast, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We want to thank you so much for making Locked On Bucs your first listen or view every single day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure you are following us on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs. And of course, he is Evan Klosky at eKlosky WTSP. You can find my stuff over at SBNationsBucsNation.com. And of course, you can find Evan on 10 Tampa Bay and at 10tampabay.com. We are here with you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, along with our everydayers. And as, of course, we get into July, we'll be back to 5 days a week. But for the meantime, we want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listen or view every single day. Antonio Brown is apparently still a thing, so we're going to talk about that coming up in a little bit. But first, Evan, there are a lot of things being said. It's the offseason. It's kind of the dead period. A lot of projections I talked about on last Friday's episode. Mike Clay of ESPN has done his full 2023 projections for every single team. But there's a lot of storylines that kind of get beat into the ground, and there are some storylines that don't get the attention they probably should. So we're going to talk about the most overrated and underrated storylines so far, and we're going to start with the overrated. And what do you view as the most overrated storylines for the Buccaneers this offseason?
This is not necessarily in order of most and least importance, but
Sure.
But on my list here is that the Bucs are a bad rushing football team. I know the stats we saw last year. People are hammering that. I think people are not properly equating Dave Canales. I think people are not properly equating how rudimentary Byron Leftwich's system was and how it is predicated on star power to make it happen. I don't think people are properly evaluating the return of Ryan Jensen into the mix, hopefully fully healthy, we think, along with, Tristan moving to the left side, and then you have Gedeke, who I think I'm a fan of now that he's at his more natural position. Cody Malk, you just invested another day one, day two pick in an offensive lineman. So I just have a hard time believing the Buccaneers are going to be spinning their wheels again, not finding much success running the football. Whenever you hear people trash the team for that, that is a reflection on 2022. I do not believe that will be the prognostication into 2023.
Yeah, I certainly can see that. I was actually just on another show talking about reasons the Bucs could win the NFC South and reasons that they won't. And one of the reasons that I gave for both was the offensive line and the ability to stay healthy. Like, the offensive line could end up being fantastic and being just fine, especially in Dave Canales' system. But there's that lingering doubt of, is Luke Gedeke going to be able to make the transition over to right tackle and play as well as he did, that, being one of the reasons that he got drafted? How is Cody Malk going to adapt? How is Tristan's move to the left side going to be? Can Ryan Jensen stay healthy? All those things start to play into it. But of course, you're not going to be able to run the ball without an offensive line, and we don't know how this offensive line is going to gel. So I can certainly see how it's, to me, it's the fact that the Bucs aren't getting any benefit of the doubt or any kind of I can't even think of the word that I'm trying to use. There's nobody saying, look, this was a bad run team last year, but they could be good this year based on the offense, based on the changes along the offensive line, based on the new offense coordinator. It's just all been flat out, no, this team's going to be just crap at running the football.
Yeah, I just think people are a little too down on what they'll be able to do in this new system. And so I just think that it's an overrated angle and a lazy one to say that this team cannot run, so the offense is going to stink. I think they're going to run more efficiently this year.
All right, what's your next overrated storyline for the season?
Now, having said all that, in general, Rachaad White. I love Rachaad White. So please let me explain myself. Rachaad White, I don't think there's been a player who has marketed himself more in this offseason than Rachaad White. He is on every show. He has been on Bucs content. He's been in every community event. It's all fantastic. But he has certainly raised his profile significantly from last year having Leonard Fournette in front of him to now being the tailback in town, the lone tailback in town, we'll say. I'm not sure what we can expect from Rachaad White. I mean, is he really a pure bell cow? Because let's talk about the running back situation. You have Sneak, Keyshawn Vaughn, behind him, who I think for another year we're going to hear something along the lines of, yeah, we trust Zeke, yeah, we trust Sneak. Sneak's good. Like we always get all this love for Keyshawn Vaughn, and then he never plays during the season. So let's not fall into that trap. They got Chase Edmonds. I mean, he's on the certainly the last few holes of his career. Like, they definitely could use another back. Mm-hmm. And I just think, while I believe the rushing game is going to be better, and while I think Rachaad White is going to be excellent, I think it's overrated to feel like Rachaad White is hands down locked in for a huge year. We just don't know. It could happen. I'm not saying it can't. I just think we've run a little bit too far on the train of like Rachaad White, and we need to take a step back and say, what are reasonable expectations? What can we expect from a second-year guy who had certainly showed flashes of greatness last year, but also fumbled the ball a little bit, didn't have significant carries, was sharing the load. It's going to look different this year unless I get surprised and Zeke accepts a small deal and we see Ezekiel Elliott in town or some other notable big name. I just the love for Rachaad White, while I understand it, I think has gotten to the point of a bit overrated.
All right. I'm going to refrain from response because I'm willing to bet that by about noon on Wednesday, I'm going to get a text from David saying I have to respond to what Evan just said. So I will refrain. But what's your final most overrated storyline?
My final one, and by the way, these are overrated storylines entering training camp. The Bucs stink. It's pretty much like, I mean, how many times can we hammer this? And when you look at the starters on this team, I have a really tough time believing that they are not good enough to compete for the divisional title. Now, we'll get into another point I have in the underrated pile. But let's just assume everyone is healthy, game one of the year. You cannot tell me the team that they're going to put out on the field is not a good team. It's a good team. Like a lot of Super Bowl winners, super talented players who are highly coveted or will be highly coveted in free agency. Mm-hmm. I just am not buying the fact that they're this trash team that is going to tank for Caleb Williams, though that might be the most opportunistic thing to do halfway through the year. We'll reassess. But going in week one, I think that they can compete in a really bad division.
Yeah, I'm certainly with you 100% on that one. And again, it goes back to kind of what you said about the run game. It's a lazy narrative that everyone who doesn't focus on this team and doesn't study them the way local media does just wants to discount the entire roster because Tom Brady left. Well, most of the guys that were on the team that caused Brady to arrive are still here. So we know that the team still has talent. It's just lazy and very disrespectful to the 52 players on the roster that weren't named Tom Brady. So Evan has told you about the things that are overrated, but what isn't being talked about enough? That is coming up next here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Baseball season is in full swing, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That is $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. Just go to FanDuel.com/locked-on to join today. The Reds actually lost a series over the weekend, but they're still one of the best teams in baseball right now. So keep hammering Cincinnati money line all the way through July, because guess what? They get to face the Brewers 9 times. I'm going to go ahead and guess they go 8-1 in those 9 games.
Sure. 1-8 coming.
Hey, the streak was broken. Thank you very much. Anyway, don't miss your chance to snag a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/locked-on to sign up. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listener view every single day. Make sure that you are coming back on Friday. I think David and I are recording together, but I'm not 100% sure. I know last week I said David and I would be back. There were some scheduling conflicts. He had to cover the NBA draft, and I think this weekend he might be traveling, so it might just be me all by my lonesome again. But you'll have to tune in Friday to find out for sure. So you talked about the run game. You talked about Rachaad White. You talked about the Buccaneers stinking, all as overrated storylines leading up to training camp. What aren't people talking about enough? What is your first underrated storyline for the Buccaneers?
Outside of offensive line, this team lacks depth, big time. The too deep is it's going to be thin on the back end. So where, again, talking about the overrated angle, the team stinks. Not true. But if injuries happen, I certainly can understand where the season goes south, because think about all these positions in your head at home. You're listening. Running back, quarterback, wide receiver, linebacker, edge, corner, safeties. Like, think about the people who are back. And I didn't even mention the defensive line, which I think is better supported now, but still they get thin when someone goes down. Someone's got to play more snaps. Think about all the people who are playing backups. It's a bit concerning. A lot of question marks outside of offensive line, as I mentioned again, actually very well stocked. So I think the narrative has not been properly played. On one hand, they don't stink. On the other hand, we should be talking about what happens when injuries start happening and who are going to be the people stepping up. Because in training camp, more than any camp that I've covered in a while, we really need to dig into who are going to be the backups, because those positions are highly coveted and we're going to see them. We are going to see them throughout the season because it is hard to believe that everyone's going to make it through completely healthy.
Yeah, and I'm sure there are plenty of teams in the NFL that you can point to position groups where they don't have a lot of depth. And if somebody goes down, they are going to struggle a lot. I'm sure the Bucs aren't an outlier in that category, but it seems like, and I think this is kind of the point you're trying to drive home, is that the majority of the position groups, one injury could be catastrophic to the entire group. Like if Carlton Davis goes down, it could be pretty devastating for the entire secondary. If Rachaad White goes down, they may be one of the worst rushing teams in the NFL. And on other teams, maybe they have 2 or 3 position groups where that's true, not quite as many as the Buccaneers. So it's a process. We all know that it's a process to build that back up, and a lot of that's going to be supplemented when they actually have some money to spend. Otherwise, it'll have to be through the draft. And we've said numerous times, you've said it, I've said it, David said it, this is going to be a multi-year process to be able to get back to where they're actual Super Bowl contenders. But what is your next underrated storyline?
The team is fast. And that is a pretty underrated storyline considering how old and slow they were last season. Especially I want to talk about the speed D. That's a saying that I kind of taken from Alex Grinch back in the day when he was at Washington State. What they were able to do with Kalijah Kancey and Yaya Diaby, and they got Joe Tryon-Shanka still there, and hopefully Shaq is back to what we think he could be. Shedding guys like Nacho and Will Golston. The speed element, along with Devin White, who we think is going to play this year, right? The speed element of this defense is going to shine and make Todd Bowles multiple, create tremendous pressure, which he loves to do. I think it will certainly help out the back end when he can do that. I think their rushing defense will improve because of it. Something that normally they're a top 5 rushing defense. Last year, they took a big step back in that category because they just started moving side to side on the Bucs, and they didn't, have really the bodies to keep up with them laterally. So underrated. We're not talking enough about how they've upgraded with their speed, most notably on the defensive line. And that is in return going to make them a scary defense to play.
Yeah, I can certainly get behind that. And, a lot of times when we talk about how fast a team is, people immediately just go straight to the offensive skill position players. They think wide receiver speed. They think running back speed. And not enough gets said about the speed that you have on defense, the speed from your edge, the speed from your linebackers, the speed of your secondary, especially when it comes to closing speed or being able to generate pressure on a quarterback quickly after the snap. So I think that's a really solid point that, to be fair and honest, we haven't talked about it enough on this show, let alone, seeing other people talk about it. But Evan, what is your final underrated storyline heading into training camp?
I have a tie for 2 here. 1, Mike Evans, because he's always underrated, right? Like, come on now.
I will accept that.
Come on now. So, yeah, I have to put that out there. But 2, Tristan Wirfs moving to left tackle. I think it's a bit underrated that people are making it seem like this will be a seamless transition for him. Now, he is an elite offensive lineman, an elite tackle. Is it fair to wonder if he's going to go from the best at his position, which arguably he was at right tackle? Not many other right tackles in the National Football League were doing what Tristan Wirfs was doing, back-to-back All-Pro. I mean, the cream of the crop. Is it hard to assume that maybe he could be top 5, top 7 left tackle with the move? I think that's reasonable to talk about. We don't know. It's just not going to be super easy. And when we hear him say that he worries about it every day, that he's not going to be the same guy moving from the right to the left. Of course, I think a part of that is him being self-deprecating, humble and grinding and work ethic and being his toughest critic. Yes, that's all in there. But I don't want to make it a given that he's going to go over to the left tackle and become the greatest left tackle in the National Football League, like he was the greatest right tackle in the National Football League, or at least arguably the greatest right tackle. So underrated. Tristan Wirfs is a load, amazing. Tampa Bay is lucky to have him. Might not be the best at his position anymore, but that's not to say he's not good, right? This goes back to, the Rachaad White thing. That's not to say that Rachaad White isn't excellent. It's just the narratives that have been played out or have not played out have not either picked up enough steam or there's been too much steam. That's the whole point of this exercise that we're doing.
Well, you heard it here. Evan Klosky on June 27th has guaranteed
that
Wirfs is the first team All-Pro left tackle this season. That's what he said. You heard it. I heard it. We all heard it. But no, I get it. I absolutely get it that, and I've said if Tristan is 80% on the left side, what he was on the right side, the Bucs are going to have a top 5 left tackle in the NFL. So he may not be the best, but I think we can still expect above average left tackle play from Tristan. And I can say with 99.9% certainty that it will be an upgrade at that position over what Donovan Smith had brought to the team outside of 2020. Because I think 2020, Donovan had a spectacular season. Yeah. But outside of that season, Tristan Wirfs, even if he's not 100% what he was at the right side, is going to be a big upgrade for Baker or Kyle Trask. But Antonio Brown is back in the news and still taking shots at the Buccaneers. That's coming up in just a moment here on Locked On Bucs. Wrapping things up here on a WTSP Wednesday edition of the Locked On Bucs podcast. And Antonio Brown is still whining and crying about his exit from the Buccaneers instead of, paying the salary of the people and players that were part of the arena football team that he owned that has been kicked out of the league now because he's not paying his bills. It's kind of Antonio Brown's MO, but we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about how he went on Tyreek Hill's podcast and started blathering on and making himself out to be the victim. And it took a while to sift through a lot of the things that he threw out there. But just a quick rundown for anyone that didn't see or hear the clip. Antonio Brown said that, and I'm paraphrasing for most of this, the Buccaneers tried to get him to come into the facility during his suspension for the fake COVID vaccine card. He was taking shots at Alex Guerrero's method of trying to motivate him and instead caused a rift between the two. Said that Tom Brady called him a narcissist and that Brady wasn't supporting him anymore and instead was trying to control him. That he told the staff, the coaching staff, that he needed to rest for the remainder of the regular season so he'd be ready for the playoffs. And Bruce Arians said no one was resting because of the injuries at the wide receiver position. That was followed up by a call from Brady convincing Brown to play against the Jets and that he would get a lot of targets. Of course, Antonio Brown failed to mention on the show that he had a bonus that he was trying to reach, that those incentives were going to help him get. That, of course, didn't enter his mind. He said that there was, quote unquote, bad energy that spilled into the game and, quote, Guerrero didn't want to work with me. I'm paying him. Brady doesn't want to throw me the ball. And you making me like I'm crazy. F all you blankety blankers. I'm out of here. End quote. So,
are we sure that Alex Guerrero got money from Antonio Brown?
Well, I mean, he probably didn't actually pay the money, but allegedly he was paying Alex Guerrero for this extra work and extra preparation and working with somebody outside of the team facility, but then there was a rift because he liked working with the Bucs employees more than he liked working with Guerrero. But my guess would be that he never actually paid him because Antonio Brown has a tendency to do such things.
Yeah. Once again, I think Antonio Brown has layered his resume in consistent fashion of allegedly not paying people. He has consistently played the victim card. Mm-hmm. He has consistently thrown every single person who has ever worked with him under the bus.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, whether we go back to the Pittsburgh days and throwing management under the bus there, the whole Robert Kraft comments after his short stint with the Patriots were done. The Raiders brought him in, and he swiftly gave them the finger and pretty much forced his way out of town and said yada, yada, yada. Came to the Buccaneers. Kudos to Tom Brady, Bruce Arians, and everybody in tow who was able to get 2020 from him, because it did help the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to a Super Bowl. He was a big part of that team. He was a big part of 2021. I mean, I forget the exact stat, but they were undefeated when Antonio Brown played. So yeah. I'm pretty sure they were undefeated with Antonio Brown on the field. At least in 2021, I know that was true. I forget if that spilled over into 2020. I forget what exactly his record was, but it was incredible with Antonio Brown. He was an incredible talent, and then he proceeded to throw the Bucs under the bus live, act like a fool, and then proceed to throw allegations towards the Buccaneers organization, towards Bruce Arians, spoke endless amounts of crap about Tom Brady, who had his back and gave him a second and a third chance. Just a complete disregard for anybody else. And then he proceeds to give back to the community of Albany, and then allegedly fails to pay players and coaches, allegedly pulls money out of their accounts. There is just a consistent string of things with Antonio Brown. And, whatever has happened, that's up to courts to sift through and figure out. And whatever class action suits are brought up, things will happen, so on and so forth. He's dealt with legal issues in the past, and those have been figured out. But, I think it's safe to say, at least when it comes to the Buccaneers situation, the allegations he made out of the gates against the Bucs, they went absolutely nowhere. So obviously they didn't really feel like they had strong standing to get his money back or to have a case. And I truly believe, the truth most likely lies in the fact that his ankle was effed up. I do believe that. He had a terrible injury that happened in that Eagles Thursday night football game, I believe. And, I think that Bruce Arians and company were probably over his stuff. I think there was a falling out between Brady and Alex Guerrero. And in the end, trust for him is the biggest currency in life. And once he lost Tom Brady and Alex Guerrero in that relationship, he just imploded it all. That's my opinion on the matter. But whatever he's going to put out there, whatever he continues to put out there to try to stay relevant, to do all this stuff, I mean, it's not even worth reporting anymore. I don't even handle this stuff anymore because it's not worth giving time to. His voice isn't worth it because so many times he's been contradicted and we found out as lies. And It's like, why even give it the airspace necessary? So, that's the world we live in. We're talking on a podcast right now. It's just understand that a lot of players are doing podcasts right now because they want to control the narrative. They want to control their stories. And when Antonio Brown goes on podcasts with people who are going to give him the floor and chum it up with him, then it works in his favor. But anytime he's given any sort of tough nudge or questions, he is running out the door. So it's tough to truly push and understand what the truth is because he continues to sell the victim card. And, I think everybody at this point understands where Antonio Brown is, what and what he will be. And I'm glad that we've all come to those realizations.
He lost the benefit of the doubt a very, very long time ago. And you go back to his Raiders days when he told the owner, Mark Davis, hey, let me go and you don't have to worry about paying me the $30 million guaranteed. Mm-hmm. And so he did. And then Antonio Brown tried to sue for the $30 million that he said, don't worry about. And it's just, you have all of the off-field issues, the moving guys, the football league that he's, going to be going through a court case with. And to me, it's another example of a distorted reality.
Yep.
And I say all this to also say that, again, Antonio Brown has said some stupid and awful things. He's done some stupid and awful things, especially taking shots at Tom Brady during his divorce and almost celebrating it on social media and all that. But at the same time, you also kind of have to wonder if there are underlying medical issues that are contributing to the behaviors and the stories and all of that. Is, a lot of people like to joke about it, but you look back at the pre-Burfict hit Antonio Brown and the post-Burfict hit Antonio Brown. And if there are some issues there from all of the hits that he's taken, not just that one specifically, but, maybe it's some sort of underlying issue somewhere.
Maybe.
But
it could very well be. But he could also just be
a jerk.
Who he is and a jerk. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it just, it would be nice if he sought help. And, we can't really, a lot of football players, unfortunately live with CTE. We're still trying to figure it out, right? The sport's still trying to figure it out too. So it's just, it would be, I think for us as humans, it's more easily digestible, his actions, if we associate it with that.
Sure.
And it certainly would explain a lot. We just don't know. And it is sad. But it is also frustrating because he has to also take a step for himself to get help. And he continuously doubles and triples down on this stuff and moves about his business. So, he is declined to ever use that as an excuse. The one thing is that he takes culpability on his actions to blame others.
Yeah.
That he's cool taking culpability on. But yeah, it's crappy because as I mentioned, he is an elite talent.
You know what they say, there's one side of the story, there's the other side of the story, somewhere in the middle, there's the truth. I don't know if we're ever going to get the Buccaneers side of the story. Might be a few years down the line. Maybe Tom Brady writes a tell-all book and he dives into this a little bit. fingers crossed, maybe we'll get him on the show to do a book tour. But for now, we are going to bid you all a fair adieu. Thank you so much for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every single day, for making us part of your day, part of your routine. Of course, you can follow everything on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at JYarcho_Bucs, at eCloskey, WTSP. And of course, you can find David at DHarrison82. Check out everything that Evan is doing on 10 Tampa Bay and 10tampabay.com. Check out my work over at BucsNation.com. And if you feel so inclined, you can send us an email at lockedonbucspodcast@gmail.com. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. We thank you so much for joining us right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.